How you going, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show, Week 14. I'm on location in the shadow of New York City. We've got a Monday night doubleheader Tuesday midday here in Sydney and Melbourne coming up. It is on ESPN1 Laws, Miami hosting Tennessee. On ESPN2, you can come hang out with me as the Giants host the Packers. And if you're still looking for other options, I think Fox Footy's got a round 17 game from 2013, Gold Coast Collingwood. If you're keen. If you're not, and if you're watching this, I don't know if you are. But Laz, the drive down here to New York, and it's about a 2.5 hour drive from my house. Yeah, everybody gets traffic everywhere, right? You're Sydney CBD, you deal with that all the time. I've had to make a hook turn. I still haven't had anybody explain to me with any kind of
That's a
validity
Melbourne thing, mate. Don't
why
put
that's
that.
a thing in Melbourne. I know, but Laz, I've been behind the wheel for all of 50 meters, and this is the first time I've ever driven sitting on that side of the car, even. And all of a sudden, I need to go left to turn right, wait till the light looks orange. Anyway, my drive down here, New York traffic is as bad as anywhere. I know there are places that are worse, but not many. And I was thinking it's a little bit reminiscent of what we have going on now, that experience, the open road, the gridlock traffic of what's going on as we approach the final 4 weeks of the NFL regular season.
Yeah, I think we've all been out there on the road when everybody out there, especially in the holiday times, we want to encourage safe driving, stay to speed limits, all that stuff. Okay, take care of yourselves out there. But we've been out there when there's been some perhaps suspect conduct from the vehicles around us, whether that's appearing in the mirror a little too close, as we see down there, objects in the mirror closer than they appear. That's the warning. And we're thinking about these divisional races, and some of those have the cars jostling on this race towards the playoffs. We always talk about, playoff races, title chases, hunting for, wild card spots, all that stuff. And after week 14's opening, well, we had Thursday Night Football, but what we got yesterday, and just a phenomenal day of football with some statements made and some upsets, perhaps some upsets that didn't feel like upsets because you saw they were coming, which challenges the whole philosophical concept of an upset. But regardless, we're starting to see some of these division leaders, they're not sure about their surroundings anymore. They might have somebody in the blind spot, or they might see some taillights in the far that you're wondering if they've hit the NOS, and you've got Dom Toretto chasing after you.
Well, Laz, and the thing is, if this is the case in most places, if you're in the front, you have the right of way. If these teams keep winning, they'll be fine. But some of them have put themselves in a bit of a precarious predicament. And let's start with the big game, the one that was a featured game after SportsCenter NFL Blitz with Herm and me. We led into Cowboys Eagles. Eagles stumping the Cowboys 33-13, really from in every facet, offense, defense, and special teams. Philly's first game held without an offensive touchdown in nearly 6 full years. Dallas overtakes the NFC East. For the moment, Philly is in the wild card, but Philly still weirdly controls its own destiny. If they win out and Dallas wins out, Philly would then overtake Dallas in the tiebreakers to win the division. So this for me kind of felt like Philly's in the blind spot. Dallas, although they're technically ahead, it's only just, and frankly, Dallas doesn't have the ability to change lanes and obstruct Philly. They have to hope Seattle does it, because next week Philly goes to Seattle in this window as a flexed Monday night game, Tuesday midday, from originally Chiefs-Patriots. Now it'll be Philly in Seattle. But the rest of the way, the Eagles have the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. After that game, Philadelphia goes Giants, Cardinals, Giants. All due respect to the 53 men in each of those locker rooms, I would be stunned if the Eagles dropped any of them. Yes, Dallas has now blown out an opponent, and you beat somebody by 20, it's a blowout. 8 times this year, 8 wins by 20 or more points. You look at the 4 teams that have done that in the Super Bowl era. 96 Packers won the Super Bowl. 99 Rams, greatest show on turf, won the Super Bowl. And the 2007 Patriots didn't lose a game until the Super Bowl. So all 4 teams have gotten to the Super Bowl. Dallas, for me, is the best team in the NFC behind San Francisco only. But I put Philly in the blind spot because Dallas is kind of stuck where they are. They're contingent on Philly moving for them to get forward and get a home field situation in the playoffs where they are so dominant in Arlington.
And I think I was tossing up which team to put in the blind spot here, because you do have Dallas sitting currently on top of on top of those NFC East standings. But if it does play out, my hesitancy is from everything that we've seen in this NFL season so far, is I have hesitancy to predict that either of those two teams are just going to comfortably win out. We've seen Dallas drop games they shouldn't have against the aforementioned Cardinals, and the Dallas Cowboys have. I think the Dallas Cowboys have a huge challenge ahead of them schedule-wise. They do have the Bills on deck. They do have the Dolphins on deck. They do have the Lions, who, whilst that is their defense has certainly taken a step back, those three right off the bat there over the next 3 weeks are going to further test the Cowboys' credentials. Those who, I'm sure there's people that are saying today that, they're coming up with the next mark that the Cowboys haven't done. They haven't beaten anybody. They haven't beaten anybody winning record. Seahawks lost, so they're not a winning record team. The Eagles, they haven't
beaten anybody with a winning record on the road.
There you go. Something's gonna come up. But so there's still tests ahead for Dallas. So whilst I do agree that the Eagles would be in the blind spot there,
that was for somebody in the comments. I'm covering the Giants game, so I didn't want to wear a Giants or Packers gear. So I'll do Dan the Man Marino, Brad Bolt, and Laz Dallas Cowboys. You have a wardrobe full. You might need to pace yourself for the playoffs.
Well, let's see about. But I agree, right? The Eagles would be in the blind spot, and importantly, I don't think the Cowboys should be worried about the blind spot because that's in your other lane. The Cowboys need to stay in their lane right now because of what's ahead of them, because of the challenges that do present themselves with those three teams, with those offenses that are going to push them. We can query about the different level of defense that you're going to get from the Bills, who've suffered so many injuries this year. The Dolphins, who I think have been an ascending defense, but how do they supplement pass rush with Jalen Phillips out? And then, the Lions. We spent a lot of time talking about that. So what I will say, though, is that performance from the Cowboys, whilst I think they need to stay in their lane and focus ahead, they have to be feeling really, really comfortable about the three phases of football we saw yesterday. The Cowboys offense came out firing early. They cooled off in the third quarter. Eagles pegged it back a little bit and then did what they had to do with drives in the fourth quarter, bleeding enough clock, keeping that the points ticking over, helped by a defense that insists on taking the ball away. I thought it was interesting that in the first time these two teams played, very fair to argue the Cowboys outplayed the Eagles and didn't do enough to get the job done late. 3 fumbles in that game from the Eagles. All 3 landed back with the Eagles. Yesterday, 3 fumbles forced by the Dallas Cowboys on the Eagles, all 3 of them ending up in Cowboys' hands. Look, there's a host of performances. What I want to just, before we get any further away, is that whilst I'm not sure how this is going to relate to our analogy on the road here, but if we're talking about, an easy, just like easy, smooth, open road, top, back, comfortable, hair flowing, not even fussed at all, in cruise control. Cruise control would be the phrase. There we go. I've worked it back. Brandon Aubrey. My goodness.
Laz, I'm worried.
Why are you worried?
Mm-hmm. 1998 was early in the ascendancy of my NFL fandom. Denver Broncos were reigning Super Bowl champions. They were awaiting the winner of the Falcons and the Vikings in the Super Bowl NFC Championship game. Hall of Famer Gary Anderson was perfect for field goals on the season. No. Perfect in the playoffs. I think he was 69 from 69 for all kicks in regular season and playoffs. And of course, what would have been the game-clinching field goal, he missed. Falcons go down, get the game winner, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl and getting housed by the Broncos. Anyway, Rod Smith, John Elway, the whole nine. But what I noticed is after Aubrey hits from 60 in the first half, took some chutzpah to even attempt that at that stage of the game. Hits from 59. The one he had late from 50, the optics of it looked like it was 35 out. It was just one of those things. You see those sports analogies when Steph Curry shoots, the rim kind of looks bigger. And just all those sorts of cross-sport analogies you get when somebody, in baseball, the ball looks bigger when Juan Soto's swinging the bat. With Brandon Aubrey, him lining up from 50 felt like an extra point, the new 33-yard extra point. It just, distance is not going to be a factor. That from 60 hit the net. That was good from 67, 68. His leg is unbelievable, and his accuracy, obviously, he is yet to miss, despite the announcer jinx every time he goes out.
Former football as in the world game player.
MLS,
Notre Dame,
Toronto
I believe.
FC.
Yeah, was a number 1 pick and was at the USFL Super Draft. I'm throwing some
Birmingham Stallions, baby.
There you go. This man is his nickname around Dallas Cowboys town is they call him Butter Aubrey, which is appropriate because his tempo and his distance is like some sort of gorgeous hybrid between peak Freddie Couples and peak Ernie Els there on the tee. It is absolutely smooth sailing. And look, the man has distance for days. And what I think that Brandon Aubrey and this absolutely money kicking from distance and the style is, it looks so natural. And that leads me to believe that I think we'll have some special team scouts and some area scouts, perhaps looking more at the round ball game. It's not the first time that someone with a football background has made it into American football.
Tony Miola for the Jets.
Exactly.
John Roberts in the comments is curious if he ever played soccer. I sense a little bit of cheekiness in that comment, but point taken. Yeah, but it is appropriate. This guy didn't come through the traditional system, and every broadcast when they get him for the first time, that's the note they want to include. I think we've exhausted that. No, we haven't. We're going to bring
you go get the guy with the soccer background, football background, but also, who was a software engineer and taken up a job in that rather than spending a second, third, fourth round pick on a kick. And we've seen how that's gone in recent draft classes. But that in a couple months' time, when we're in draft season, which we love to do, there are going to be so many narratives about which soccer team, which college soccer program has been, house for area scouts and special team scouts and special team coaches as people try to replicate what's been a great story. But yeah, I think we agree there. There's a blind spot there. Cowboys, though, eyes forward. Don't worry about changing lanes. Don't worry about indicating, get out of there. You're on the freeway. You're on the highway. Control what you can control. Stay in lane.
All right, Laz, we're more than a quarter of the way through the show and not even a quarter of the way through this segment. So let's speed it. Let's put the foot on the gas a little bit. Really none of these other teams are. I'm going to go to the NFC North. We touched on the Lions a moment ago. This, to me, feels like the break check. And I had to explain this to you. I didn't realize this wasn't a universal thing. Sometimes when somebody gets a little too close, kind of behind you a little bit on the wheel, you tap the brakes, and it forces them to brake. And it's not the kindest thing to do. And you can actually be ticketed for it here in the US, but it's a brake check. And I say that because the Lions should be running away with this division. And when the Vikings start to heat up, right when the Packers start to heat up, the Lions, their form falls apart. Not that their defense has regressed from year over year, but it's gotten worse even over the last few weeks. You look, they had to come back from 12 points down, the first of 84 teams to do it this season in the last 4 minutes to beat the Bears once. They get smoked at home on Thanksgiving to a Packers team that had been struggling to that point. Now the Packers have found their form, buoyed by that. Then the Lions are up 21 to the Saints, whose offense has been anything but marching this season. Yet somehow you get to the third quarter, Lions up 21-0 through 7 minutes, and then it's a 24-21 game midway through the third quarter. And then they score 0 points after halftime, blow a halftime lead at the Bears. This Detroit team really struggles with mobile quarterbacks. Justin Fields, again, he averages 90 rush yards per game against the Lions. And you look at the Lions' upcoming schedule, none of those quarterbacks are exactly immobile. Nobody has the pace of Justin Fields, but Dak Prescott can step up if he needs to. Russell Wilson's been magnificent out of pocket. Who knows who's going to be playing QB for the Vikings, but the Lions play them twice. So if Josh Dobbs is the choice QB, somebody who struggled to run the ball, only 53 rush yards per game in his last three, only 5.4 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 5 picks. If Dobbs ends up regaining the starting role that he seemed to have lost late in that 3-0 win, we want to talk round ball football scores. Minnesota United beating Las Vegas Lights 3-0. But if Josh Dobbs is the quarterback in weeks 16 and 18, they play twice in 3 weeks. I hate that scheduling. Detroit could struggle to stop that Minnesota offense. And for Green Bay, who is 2 games back, 2.5, they're favorites today against the Giants, a game coming up on ESPN2 at noon. Then here's the Packers' rest of schedule. Tampa, at Carolina, at Minnesota, Chicago. That's how Green Bay closes out the season. They need to win out and have Detroit lose either two of the games if one's a division game, or I think if not, then it would need to be 3 because Detroit does possess the tiebreaker over Green Bay with conference record. But still, Detroit's moving backwards, not moving forwards. That's the problem.
Absolutely. And I think we need to, you mentioned the schedule there. You mentioned with how cookie it is for a team, how comfortable it is for a team like the Packers, should they take care of business tonight? And then you look at the Broncos, who, I would be picking against them against the Denver. Looking at the Lions, I pick them to lose against the Broncos, tip the Broncos there. Vikings, Lions twice, as you mentioned. I think you end up with a kind of a divisional toss-up. There would not stun me at all if we got a chaotic split between those two, and then they visit the Cowboys, and I think those are two teams trending in very different directions the last little bit. So it's not for me just with who's behind them. And you're giggling, so I'm going to go to the comments here. Important question. We'll get to that, Brad. Thank you. When we're looking at the Detroit Lions and the prospect of who's behind them, to me, I don't want to just limit it to the NFC North. I want to think about the playoffs as a whole and the NFC wildcard picture and who they might be likely coming up against. And we have a hot take related to it that we'll touch on, but there are some very strong form teams, particularly playing good offensive football in the NFC, that are making a run into those 5 through 7 slots, which just presents such a bad matchup. We saw a terrible matchup with what the Bears did. Mm-hmm. This can also impact and be a huge matchup problem with teams like the Rams. If however it works out, if the Packers make a run and they wind up in the seeding and they find themselves there again, we've seen what a bad matchup there is. I just think defensively there's so many questions, and the problem is at this point of the season, you'd hope maybe you'd be getting some cattle back for the Lions to actually be going the other way when we've seen key contributors like an Aleem McNeil, they can going on to injured reserve and missing time. It's just trending in a poor direction. So we get into colder weather football. You want your defense to be able to stand strong at home, or if you do win a game and go on the road, it's looking really negative. And I think, you saying a break check, it feels like they're doing that because they just don't have the gears to go and put some distance between who's behind them.
And Laz, not all that dissimilar. It is the AFC South. I mean, Mike Tannenbaum and I on Friday morning, SportsCenter NFL Blitz, talked about, is this sneakily one of the more compelling division races down the stretch? The Texans just beat the Broncos at the time. The Colts are very quietly putting together a 4-game win streak. The Jags seeming to have control of the division. And then Trevor Lawrence hurts his ankle and they lose on Monday. This is even after the Monday Night Football loss. It's all three of these teams lost this past week. And so for me, this wasn't so much a break check as it is tailgating. They're a little closer together. Yep. Thankfully for Jacksonville, they have the tiebreaker over both of these teams. They're 4-1 in the division. They have only one division game left, and that is the first tiebreaker. They haven't lost either of these teams twice. That's why that win in Houston for them was so significant several weeks ago. But This is tailgating. Houston and Indianapolis both making Jacksonville uncomfortable. And Jacksonville's weird, man. Every time we think that they've grabbed control of the division or we give them our confidence, they recede. And then we doubt and they win. And it's been like that all season. So these teams are right on Jacksonville's tail. But it's causing all three, it seems like, to slow down. Houston's battered after that loss to New York. Embarrassing. 8 punts on their first 8 possessions. You want to talk about crumbling under pressure? Gardner Minshew pressured 10 times in the loss to Cincinnati, which isn't a lot, but he went 0 for 6, 3 sacks, and a pick in those pressures, and he had 1 scramble as well. Houston and Indianapolis play each other in Week 18. That could well decide a wild card spot in the AFC. I don't think it's going to decide the division. I think Jacksonville's going to skate by and get through it. But what concerns me is absent Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram had a great game. Absent Christian Kirk, the other receivers, 11 for 30 when Trevor Lawrence targeted them. The defense gave up a couple long passes to mighty Joe Flacco. But yeah, Laz, this is just kind of bogging down. The tailgating is just bogging down everybody in the AFC South. And I think it's really made me realize that none of these teams are serious, are in a position to make a serious Super Bowl run. One may win playoff game by default, especially if it's Jacksonville against Houston. But if the playoffs started today, the Browns are in Jacksonville. And having watched what I watched, the score is a little bit deceptive. I don't know that I could pick against Cleveland, even on the road against Jacksonville from what we saw here. A couple weeks to sort that out. But it doesn't feel like Jacksonville's poised to climb the ladder like their schedule is set up for them to. Not only these teams all lose, they all entered with a top 10 easiest strength of schedule heading into this final month of the season.
With Jacksonville, you just wonder that they can't, getting into our driving analogy, the rhythm that they hit at times, Evan Ingram has a big game, or Calvin Ridley has a false dawn early, then goes quiet, then it sparks up again, and it's kind of middling. And it's Christian Kirk. It feels like they can't get the playlist right, that whoever's in charge of the Spotify or the whatever music they've got hooked up, it feels like they just can't get the balance right there. And that week in, week out, they're not hitting on all cylinders. You're hitting the open highway and you're hitting 2 good songs, then all of a sudden we've veered off and All Saints has come on, and that's just not the vibe we'd previously been looking for, with some nice open country. Perhaps for me on the road, I'm certainly liking a little, a little dad rock, little yacht rock, certainly some 90s alt rock. There's been a lot of Blink 182 played in the car lately, and then obviously going to get some country going. We're going to get some Chris Stapleton going. Some Luke Combs will get a run. But you veer off sideways into a frustratingly overplayed 90s pop band, and it can really harsh the vibe. But what else do we say when someone's tailgating? It's just like, hey man, just go around. Like, you've got an overtaking lane there. If you're in such a hurry, go around. And the reason we've got tailgating here is because we just question whether either of these teams is actually going to go around. And with what's going on in Houston as well, you question the ability for them to actually hit that pace. As much praise as we've heaped on CJ Stroud, in fact, they've got even healthy in the backfield. What's going on at wide receiver there with Tank Dell going down a week ago, and now Nico Collins, your young, explosive wide receiver talent, is just taking such a massive body blow. And in this chase, and for a team that, while they've got defensive playmakers, it's not a total defense yet. They still needed another couple of draft classes, you think, to really fill out D'Amico Ryans' unit. And now that offense is not going to be able to set that, well, not as comfortably and not as predictably going to be able to set that 30-point pace, big questions about their ability to get into the overtaking lane, hit the pedal, and soar past.
Yeah, they're ahead of schedule. And this is that being exposed a little bit, that Jacksonville's just a couple of years ahead. But none of these teams grasped an incredible opportunity that they had ahead of them yesterday. Laz, quickly, we'll go to the last one, the AFC West. You and I said this is kind of like high beams. Denver isn't in position to pass Kansas City, but man, they're just annoying the hell out of them. From behind, Denver wins in LA. Justin Herbert breaks a bone in his index finger, will not be available in the Week 15 opener. But still, even prior to the injury, Denver pressured Herbert on 52% of his dropbacks. They're an absolute pest. And just when you think you've stopped the offense, Russell Wilson says, bleep it, Cortland's over there somewhere. Cortland Sutton, who's defending an armbar, catches a ball 60 air yards with one hand and then rolls under it for one of the, well, it's not even his most impressive touchdown catch this season. He had a better one in Buffalo. This is a guy who has 5 touchdown catches of lower than 30% completion probability this season. A.J. Brown is second on that list with 3. So Sutton has 2 more than him. Look, I said Denver's high beams. They're annoying from behind. They may get a wild card spot. The way Kansas City's going, Denver in the final wild card spot would not face Kansas City. They probably go to Miami for a rematch with some headlines attached to it after Miami put 70 on them in Week 3. But for Denver to catch the Chiefs, Denver would have to win out, and Kansas City lose not once but twice. Kansas City is 1 game up on the ladder, but they would have similar conference or divisional records. Kansas City has the better conference record. So if they're eye to eye with this head-to-head, Kansas City has to lose twice. Laz, tell me where they're losing twice. At New England, home to Vegas, home to Cincinnati, at the Chargers, who by then may have shut down Herbert and are going with Easton Stick. They had a season, or Patrick Mahomes, though, they're being distracted by the object behind them. And I don't think they're thinking about Denver with Buffalo, but the Kansas City has obvious problems with just distractions and being completely bogged down by a call that was objectively correct. But in the game, Patrick Mahomes, for the season, he's averaging 38% completion when pressured. That is a career low for him. They pressured Josh Allen 22 times, and he didn't perform well when he was pressured. Aside from the touchdown pass to James Cook, when Kansas City blitzed, when they pressured him 22 times, on paper, Kansas City wins that game every year for the last 5 years. They didn't in this game because they lacked the fine points of execution that we saw pronounced and magnified on an offside call that should have been, but that should not have ended the game, though it did. Kansas City was completely deflated. They couldn't recover from it. So Kansas City, distracted by the high beams behind them, just flip up the rearview mirror, dim the lights, and move forward. You have a championship caliber defense, and you have the best quarterback in the NFL. That should be enough to contend for a Super Bowl. Yeah,
we talk about the music and being able to set a nice playlist and keep a nice rhythm there with Jacksonville, and that being an issue for Kansas City Chiefs. I just want them to turn off the radio. Don't have talkback radio on. Don't even have the music on right now. You just need some silent driving. Open the window if you want. Just let some fresh air come in. Maybe some fresh ideas will float in as well. Maybe one of those ideas is, hey, what do we think? I've been harping on this a little bit. just with what we saw from, MVS failing to stop on certain routes, some drops from Kadarius Toney. I'm not going to get into the offside call, which has just lit up my mentions entirely. I think so far, if you have an opinion on what happened there with Kadarius Toney and the check that wasn't a check, did he check? Andy Reid says it wasn't a check. There's a Zapruder film out there from fans that doesn't actually show the whole play. So what play we're looking at that, he seems to have him looking towards the sideline. You've got Dan Orlovsky saying that he went through and looked at every single one of his plays and not one, of Tony's snaps, not once did he look over and check, and multiple times was he lined up, offside or in the neutral zone. Look,
4 times.
I think if you have any take on that, you will be accused of both being pro-Kansas City, anti-Kansas City, pro-ref, anti-ref, and you either watch far too much football or not enough football whatsoever. All I will say is it is not the responsibility of the referees, the officials to warn you. They can. It's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility to line up offside, to look over and go, hey, my nose, and hey, looking at my nose, I sometimes I have to be wary of, on the basketball court, on a tip-off. Not that I mean tip-offs anymore. Perhaps my nose could creep over the line there.
Or if your shoes are a couple sizes too big,
What are we rocking there, Phil?
These are Air Prestos. I have an Australia version and I have a USA version.
Size?
So, 14 American. I don't know what that is in Australia. I bought shoes once in Australia. I don't remember what the size was.
No, we most of the time you're getting the US size there. I'm a 12 to 12 and a half. But just for, holidays are coming up if you want to know. But regardless, it's on you to know that, hey, my head, my nose, my helmet, my every part of my body seemingly is in front of the ball right now. Yeah. But that was just one of them. There was a drop from Tony on 2nd and 12.
I'm not going to get into it. 2 minutes
I'm not going to get into it. Regardless, turn off this. Don't turn off the show. Stay with the show, guys. But turn off the radio. Turn off talkback. Turn off distracting music. Focus on what's ahead, because whether you think that the Chiefs get all the calls in the world or the Chiefs get none of the calls in the world, what the Chiefs do have, and it's not a gift in a bad way. It's not a gift in a rigged way. It's not a gift in a script way or a conspiracy way. It is a gift of a schedule that Phil just outlined down the road. This is a
right potholes, month. No speed bumps.
Get right month. The road has just been paved. It's beautiful. You hop on those patches of highway and you're like, oh, they clearly put the taxes to work in this suburb, in this stretch of the highway. Look at this. That's what you've got in your road to the playoffs. It's there ahead of you. And I mentioned harping on a bunch of number of things. Get involved in the Zach Ertz sweepstakes. Find some more veteran hands that you can feel a level of trust in. And who knows, maybe the presence of two, shall we say, Ertz and Kelsey both very productive. Kelsey certainly, I'd say, closer to his prime than Ertz. In the stage where they could be playing some creative kind of pickup ball style tight end, you throw two of them out there at once and let Mahomes cook. Maybe we can breathe some fun, some vigor, and some life back into this Chiefs team that we're spending far too much talking about in anguished tones. Yes.
25,172 offensive plays for Andy Reid teams. This was the first time offensive offsides was called. And not that it was an appropriate call, but it was clearly a repeat offense throughout the game that Tony.
And it's been called a lot more this year.
12 times league-wide, doubles last year. It's a point of emphasis for officials. And next year, it's going to be where tackles are lined up and how quickly they leave their stand.
Yeah.
Hey, Laz, we got a motor.
We got a motor.
Let's fire up the Hot Take Hotline presented by Macca's, where you send us your hot takes. And Josh here understood the assignment.
Yes.
Josh said, Rams at Lions, playoffs week 1, please. Stafford to win a playoff game in that building after all he's been through would be poetry. So Josh is just making a request. He's walked up to the grill and said, hey, I don't want any of the great things on the menu.
Secret menu. Smart guy.
Secret menu at Macca's. And what he's requesting is at perfect level of spice. Matthew Stafford and the Rams, who were unfortunate to lose that game at the Ravens, they did everything right. They pressured Lamar Jackson. They had 2 blown assignments in the first half that cost them. They rallied. They moved the ball well. The only thing they didn't do is manage the clock well. Sean McVay burned a timeout unnecessarily with 16 seconds left that forced Stafford to throw to the end zone in regulation when he should have been able to throw short of the line to gain or even short of the end zone and get another crack from closer in. And then in overtime, a delay of game on 3rd and 4 that moved it to 3rd and 9 that led to the punt that led to the Tylan Wallace walk-off touchdown. Rams are playing great football. That's their only loss in the last 4. Detroit is not. We could have a 3-6 matchup. The NFC South is terrible. Only time we're going to mention him on this show. Whoever wins the NFC North is your 3 seed. It's going to be Detroit. If the Rams can get to the 6, we have Matt Stafford and the Rams in Detroit. Matt Stafford would be the one to keep Detroit winless in the playoffs since 1993. Poetry.
I mean, Commanders up next, Saints, Giants, and then the big one there at the end is the 49ers. We talked about the Rams.
But that could be a dead rubber for the 49ers.
It certainly could be. Look, the Rams are a team. It's a familiar opponent against the 49ers. They've obviously danced once already this season. But we said that the Rams really did have a schedule paint by numbers the rest of the way with those 5 games. The Ravens, I want to pick them to be competitive. I thought the Ravens would win, but I thought the Rams would really be able to test some things and prod some things, give us a preview for some of how the best teams can challenge the Ravens at the business end of the season. That kind of plays out. But I ultimately thought the Ravens would get the W there. Mm-hmm. Then those 3 in the middle where they should be heavily favored. I think they should be heavily favored against the Saints. I know the Saints had a big on-paper win, but more just offensively grating frustration watching that team. And then, yes, we'll see where they are with the 49ers. Maybe the schedule smiles on them and it is a dead rubber for the 49ers. And it could be a Sam Darnold showcase game. And
the only thing that stinks for the Rams, they don't have the tiebreaker to the Packers because Brett Rippon lost at Lambeau. Somebody who's been on two teams since then. Matt Stafford wasn't fit to play. Brett Rippon goes into Lambeau, gets blown out 20-3, and that requires now the Rams to have a game of clearance above the Packers, who we've gone through their schedule. It is very easy the rest of the way. So in a cloudy NFC picture, Brad is doing some unholy things.
Yeah, Brad, as long as it's not the secret Jameson Williams Mackersburg with the Oreo McFlurry on top of it. I mean, I can't even. I know that it's a staple of kids around the world. I know this from continent to continent, that when you're a kid, you get the Happy Meal and maybe you get a sundae, and you get the chips, you get the fries, the French fries, and you dip the fries in your ice cream. Look, that's something we all go through. Some people are still there, and that's okay. That's just a nice little bit of our innocent childhood that we carry on. We don't do that enough. But that's a little step too far. I will just say before, I know time is pressing here, but I've got to get this in somewhere so it fits nicely here. Brad is requesting a hot take off me. Important question. How do we feel about Dak Prescott? Yeah, here we go.
Here we go.
He's the MVP frontrunner. He'll have to continue proving that the rest of the way. We mentioned the contest.
Unless he regresses, man, I think it's his to lose.
It is his to lose now in that front seat. We'll see. My view on the MVP race is different. Well, Tyreek Hill has an asterisk because of the position and what we expect there. I still believe Lamar should be in the conversation. He was exceptional yesterday. I think Tua doesn't get enough props. I think Brock Purdy. I think those are kind of your names. I think we've seen Jalen Hurts fall off, and Josh Allen. I suppose he could go on an absolute tear. And if he's winning the games he's supposed to and causing more upsets like he did against Kansas City Chiefs, the man is potent enough and has the highlight reel performances and the statement games enough. Consider what they did against the Dolphins. Consider what they've done against Kansas City Chiefs to make a run. But I think that's where we are. But it is Dak's to lose. But they do have tests. One of those tests for Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, head-to-head. A couple of those names. Here we go. The hand motions are happening. They all interweave down the way. But yes, it's Dak Prescott's to lose. You can make all the jokes about EPA per play and success rate and CPOA all you want and the advanced numbers. It came to prove. So those, especially some of my dear colleagues, and thinking some of my friends in Bristol, Thomas, how you doing? Yes, there'll be a Dak Prescott EPA per play report coming your way soon. All right, hot take hotline. Nice and hot, nice and short, quick service. We're getting the food out there, aren't we, Phil?
Yeah, and Laz, so with that, we move to Feel the Flow, brought to you by Pilot, hard made easy. You and I each had a name at the tip of our tongues for this. I'll start. Joe Flacco, for an offense that could be described as flaccid, found his form. The guy who turns 39 on wild card weekend. Laz, I'll just rip through his stats in the Browns win over the Jags. This is why he was a no-brainer for me. He had, in franchise history, he's now the oldest player to have a 300-yard game. And they've had some veteran arms on that team. Not a famous roster. I mean, famously, they've kind of stunk in the draft in the last few decades, but they've had some veterans go there. Otto Graham never did it at this age. Joe Flacco, oldest with a 300-yard game. Oldest in franchise history with a 3-touchdown game. All 3 of his touchdowns were 30-plus yards downfield. He's the first Browns QB, irrespective of age, to do that since 1980. It ties the record for most in a game by the Browns. You think he's old, can't move his feet. They blitzed him, didn't work. He was magnificent against the blitz. But Laz, where the veteran savvy on in the sheets, the play sheets, shows up for Flacco is off play action. He has 5 touchdowns since he became Brown starter. 4 of those are on play action. Play action is an art. You see guys like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, they watch tape on themselves to make sure when they go to fake the handoff, it looks exactly like a real handoff. Joe Flacco, 4 play action touchdown passes the last 2 weeks. Laz, the most yards of separation for Browns receivers on touchdown passes from any quarterback this year. Numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 for most yards of separation were on Joe Flacco's 4 play action touchdown passes. He rediscovered his form. He had, I mentioned the 30-plus yard touchdowns. He had 3 of them. Last time he did that in a game, he did that. Browns hadn't had it happened since 1980. Last time he did it was 2010. So rediscovering his form of yesteryear, Joe Flacco feeling the flow.
I mean, Joe Flacco set such a nice table for these vintage players that we've certainly used words. They've been called washed up, past their prime, over the hill. And one particular word comes to mind here, and that is old. And that is what A.J. Brown called Stefon Gilmore as the Cowboys and the Eagles tussled. And Stefon Gilmore, to borrow from another athlete of yesteryear, shall we say he took that personally? He said, I was mad. I was going to show him. That's the only thing I could do. I'm still here. I think I did that today. We can dive into the metrics. We can dive into the numbers. We love to do that on Feeling the Flow. But for this one, this is narrative playing out. One with Stefon Gilmore, 2019 Defensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl champion, has led the league in turnovers, interceptions from that spot. This is a man who, one, carries himself like an exceptional professional. He's been teaching and helping and develop the young DBs in Dallas. But 2, with the locks and the helmet and the visor, there's an agelessness to his presence out there. You can forget. It's kind of like Slash, Slash from Guns N' Roses with the hat and the big hair and the shades. And you kind of get caught up. You lose track of how old this man is. You can get taken back to the 80s with Slash in the instant. And with Stefon Gilmore, he took everybody back into that, the 20 teens. The form there that we saw around 2019, his form that he put on tape, particularly think about his years with the Patriots. And Gilmore was phenomenal, whether it's against a speedy, smaller slider, not a tall receiver, but not someone overly physically dominating like Devontae Smith. We wonder how Stefon Gilmore, his legs well into his 30s, were going to hold up with a quick twitch. He was there. He was present towards the sideline. He's disrupting passes on a massive, we'll get to that in a sec. It was a 4th down play. On 3rd down, though, he was tasked with containing A.J. Brown. Huge play, big chance for the Eagles to call this one back and make it a tighter contest. Breaks down perfectly. Great read, great technique, great physicality. The following play, it's Devontae Smith. It's a blitz from the Cowboys. Heat up the middle. Quick release from Jalen Hurts short of the sticks. 4th down, needs to pick it up. Who's there? Stefon Gilmore lurking, pouncing, slamming, burying Devontae Smith, causing that turnover on downs. It's just a handful of plays that we saw from him. A guy who's had to step up. While Deron Bland, number 26, has set the record for pick sixes in a season, has 8 on the year to go with 5 in his rookie year. 8 interceptions on the year, 5 pick sixes, 5 interceptions last year. He's caught so much of the headlines. Across from him that whole time has been the steadying hand of Stefon Gilmore, with Trayvon Diggs out for the year after suffering nasty season-ending injury. So huge props to Stefon Gilmore, who was called old to his face by his opposite number, by the most physically dominant wide receiver from size, speed, explosiveness standpoint in the game today. And he responded by showing, hey, I'm as good as I ever was when needed. These big moments come up, the occasion calls to me, and I'm able to lay it down and deliver it as fine as I ever did. Stefon Gilmore, salute to you, feeling the flow. A proud honoree brought to you by Pilot for Week 14.
Joe Flacco, Stefon Gilmore honored there. Laz, it's time to go to popular demand, presented by Tab. You had a rough beat last week. I parred the hole. You had a bogey and 1 lip out, so I'm at plus 6.05 units on the year. You have receded to plus 130. We have 2 games. We're going to each do 1 pick from each game. Mm-hmm. Dolphins are 14-point favorites at home. Total there, 45.5, expecting the Miami to blow out Tennessee. And in the other game, Packers are 6-point road favorites against the Giants. Total going between 36.5 and 37 on tab. Unders this season, we did have an overhit last week. That pulled unders all the way down in Monday Night Football to 13-2 on the year. And Laws, over the last 3 seasons, when a home team is the underdog of Monday Night Football, unders are 16-3. That trend's low here in New York. Since you had the rough beat last week, I'll let you lead off. What's your first pick?
All right. Where are we leading off? In Green Bay or New York, was it?
Wherever you'd like.
Let's go Green Bay, New York. I'm going to continue a trend here. Jordan Love, multiple touchdowns, 4 straight games. Seeing 2 touchdowns here, 2 touchdowns here, 3 touchdowns here. They've taken a big beat last week. They're up against New York Giants team that doesn't leak as many aerial touchdowns as you might think, but I think the Jordan Love heat train changes that. Give me Jordan Love at 3 or more touchdowns, Philip.
He's on tilt.
3 or more touchdowns through the air, that is passing touchdowns,
Yes.
currently at 425.
425.
And I am going I am going to continue this love affair that he has laid down across the league. Jordan Love, 3 or more.
For what it's worth, 2 touchdowns is $1.90. I would tip that. 3 is a lot. It's a windy, cold day out there. But Laz, I do hope Jordan Love has a productive day. I've talked on this show about how good he is against man defense. 18 touchdowns, no interceptions this season against man. The Giants run man at the 2nd highest rate in the league. In related news, they blitz at the 2nd highest rate in the league. Love is magnificent against the blitz. A lot of that has been Christian Watson, who is not playing today. He is out with a hamstring injury. He accounts for 28.1% of the target share against man defense. That goes away. Well, Jalen Reed accounts for 26.8% of the target share, a whisker under Watson in terms of man defense. I think the Giants are going to go back to their bread and butter. They're going to say, hey, no Watson, who was terrific against man defense in the last 3 weeks as Green Bay's gotten hot. They're going to test Love with the blitz and man defense. That gives Jalen Reed the opportunity to step up. I was tempted to go with the 60-plus receiving yards here at $2.80, but I think the smarter play on a windy day, over 50.5 receiving yards at $2.20 for the young receiver who grew up in Chicago, played college ball at 2 universities in Michigan. He's accustomed to the cold. He'll be comfortable out there, and he will be productive against a lot of man defense he'll see with frequency today.
Yeah, I will say for this game as well, just know from a personal standpoint that I need Dontavian Wicks to not have a big day to have any hope of qualifying for the playoffs in our fantasy league. So I think you can imagine that Wicks is probably going to have a nice productive day. That's how this thing tends to play out. All right, my second one here. Let's keep it short. Let's keep it sharp. I think we get a bit of a Devon A-Chain showcase today. The Titans have a lot of problems. Leaking a lot of rushing touchdowns has not been one of them, but one way or another, I think Devon A-Chain at $1.80 finds his way into pay dirt. I should say Devon A-Chain makes his way to pay dirt. I think
it's okay. He changed that like 10 weeks ago. So his whole life he'd been A-Chain. His whole life he'd been A-Chain. And then 10 weeks ago, it's A-Chain. Okay.
And it is it's obviously like, it led to so many, folks in the comment section on YouTube highlight videos throughout college, call him the A-Train and all that fun stuff. But it's Devon A-Chan. Respect his decision and his pronunciation correctly of his name. What I think is going to be correct is him getting into pay dirt here. He had a couple of touchdowns on the ground last week. We're seeing him get worked back into the offense. I think it's a perfect scenario for the Miami Dolphins to put on show and provide a warning that those 4 speedy 4-3, 4-2 horsemen that they have to work with Tua Tagovailoa are all out there, all on show, and everyone on that AFC side of things is going to have to account for them when it comes to the postseason.
Laz, I'm hoping for a big day out of A-Chan for your sake and for our popular demand sake, but also for the sake of my pick. Jalen Waddle quietly is having one of these Mike Evans type seasons where he's going to get near 1,000 yards, just eclipse it. But that doesn't mean it's an average of 70 a game. It means it's 20, 40, 120, 10, 50, 115.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Waddle under 70.5 receiving yards. I'm taking at $1.80. The Titans don't really have much of a trend with pass or zone defense. They're in the middle of the pack for both. They're below average at executing both. I think this is a game that Miami goes up big. I think they win big. They beat down teams like this. They have 4 20-point wins this season. And in those 4 games, Tua Tagovailoa is averaging 273.5 pass yards. I was tempted to go under Tua 290, but 273 and 290 are too close. It takes just one big Tyreek Hill blown coverage catch and run. That's done for. But what I do think is Miami's going to be running the ball a lot in the second half, and they're going to be protecting their wide receivers, trying to limit snaps where they can in a game that they have in hand. Jalen Waddle, I made the Mike Evans comparison, 70.5 receiving yards. Waddle is under 70 in 7 of his last 9 games. The 2 he went over 70, he went over by a lot, 130, 140.
We should know Elliott.
This is a make or miss competition. Under in 7 of 9, give me that figure, under 70.5 receiving yards for Waddle at $1.80. Hey, and you got to ask yourself, what are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. Laz, I got to land the plane now because I got to get in a car and drive to MetLife. I'm like 3 kilometers away, but there isn't a path you can legally walk there. And I have like 4 hook turns to make. That's how the traffic has me going. It's ridiculous. It may as well be Geelong. Anyway, Laz, it's been a pleasure. From East Rutherford, New Jersey, or New South Wales, or anywhere in between, thank you for joining us for this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show. We will see you from our normal home field